I'm going to stick with what I would tell any coach that wins the title. Congrats to you, the whole team. Of course, your guy, Aljamain Sterling. Sometimes the fights just go this way. There was a disqualification, but I thought it was the right call. So congratulations to you, to Team Sterling, and hopefully you guys are happy, with this title. I know it's a different way to win the title. I know Aljamain put the belt, down on the ground. I know he actually wound up going to the hospital. You probably have a lot to process, but still, it still holds. Congrats.
I appreciate it, bro. Thank you.
Tell us now, what do you feel after 36 hours? We just talked to Ray Longo a few minutes ago. He says he hasn't even been able to sleep. He's happy for his guy. He loved working with you, but at the same time, he understands that nothing, I guess, is really going to be 100% like he would want for his guy until they eventually run it back someday. But how about you? How have you processed all this?
Yeah, pretty much the same, I would say. It was an invaluable experience, definitely, being able to work with Aljo and go through a championship camp. And then I think just, understanding what it takes to fight a guy like Petr Yan, that's information that I think that we'll be able to take with us onto the next fight. And to be quite truthful, I think one of the blessings about this sport and it being pretty busy, especially here at Xtreme Couture, is, my focus gets to kind of shift over to Dan Ige and Francis for the guys in March, so I try to take the 2 days, the rest of Saturday and all of Sunday to kind of reflect on things. And then, like John Anik says, turn the page and you got to move on to the next. So, the experience was great, but now I got to refocus for the other two guys for March.
Have you been in contact with Aljo? What have you kind of communicated with him in this last day and a half?
I spent the whole night, but we were at the hospital. And then I actually drove him home, so we got some time to just kind of sit and chat. But these things are out of his control. Unfortunately, right? He didn't want it to end that way either, and I'm certain he didn't want all the backlash for being the victim of an illegal blow. So he didn't do anything wrong, So just kind of just looking at the positives, I think, and then we kind of rehashed the fight. On the way there, he didn't really remember too much on the way in the hospital or in the ambulance. And then on the way home, I feel like he remembered some of the stuff, and then we kind of went over some of the fight and then some of the details of the fight. And then, I got him home, and then he had a bunch of family and friends in town. So, I dropped everything off, said hello, and then, I wanted to go home and see my family as well. And then I talked to him again yesterday and just asked how he was feeling. And he said he was feeling better today, and he was showing some of his family around town. So.
And that night, when the knee happened, what can you take us through that process of when? First of all, let's start with he's in the grounded position and Jan's got a hold of his head, and at that point, you probably aren't thinking that he's going to knee him, but were you shouting, what you wanted him to do as far as a defense or the choke itself, or you probably knew that Aljo wasn't in any trouble there. So what were you already forecasting as the next moves? And then what were you thinking when the knee actually hit? And then obviously, everything else played out.
I would imagine that from my standpoint, I just wanted him to clear the hands. And then I expected Yan to probably throw something like a rear elbow or something coming up. But when I looked at the whole fight, I kind of understood Yan was probably expecting a reshot out of Aljo once he elevated and got off his feet, maybe a reshot, and that's probably why he attempted that knee there, but just lost track of where Aljo was, and it landed. And I mean, I don't think Yan was like this malicious, like I'm going to hurt this guy in the wrong way. Unfortunately, he just threw the strike at the wrong position. And I heard Mark Smith say he's grounded, and then right as he said it, he threw the knee, and I was like. I almost thought like the guy was joking. I'm like, dude, what the hell was that? And then my immediate reaction was like, hey, that's a DQ, or let's get a point. Let's get this figured out. And then it just kind of started to drag on from that point on,
the Apex is not the biggest place in the world. After this fight, did you run into anybody from their camp and have an opportunity to just go, what happened? What were you guys thinking?
Well, I talked to Peropa last night from ATT. I think the world of that guy and that team. We're always like, I know we're friends on the road. We're friendly, but I just respect him as a coach. So we actually reached out to one another and just kind of rehashed everything and just said, "Hey, man, I know that wasn't the intentions," and vice versa. He didn't really elaborate. Only thing he elaborated on was like, I was saying punch him because I don't know what anybody else said, and I actually seen the video of coach saying, hey, just punch. So somebody in that corner apparently said, throw a kick or throw a knee. That I think that's the risk you run sometimes when you have guys in your corner that might not be experienced or understand what their role is. If Perupa was the head coach in that corner, which I don't know if he was or wasn't, but if he's wearing the mic, it should be he's the only one talking because he was actually saying the right shit. The other guy wasn't, and that's kind of why you don't put people in your corner that are shouting over your head coach.
Did Yan surprise you guys in any way? Was there anything that he brought to the table that night that I don't want to say caught you off guard, but maybe something that surprised you?
No, I think, I've worked with Yan in the past. I know how good he is. The first time I worked with him, I remember thinking to myself, this kid's going to be in that title contention or a champion sooner rather than later. So I think a lot of the things that I saw from him, I wasn't too surprised on. But I will say this, like his takedown defense was on point. But also Aljo's entries weren't that great either in that fight. So, to defend 16 out of 17 takedowns is pretty freaking impressive. I don't care who you are. So definitely that. And his cardio hung with him. I thought he did a really good job. I know Aljo put the pace on him in round one, and I think that kind of that championship experience out of him really showed. He understood how to pace himself for a 5-round fight, and I think that's a big learning curve for anybody. Getting into that 5-rounder and how do you pace yourself? So that's something I thought he did really well as well.
Man, you're a coach, you're a father, you're a friend. When you look at Xtreme Couture, it's gotten pretty young, right? Like some of ththese guys like Dan Ige, Puna Soriano, Aljamain Sterling, even Francis Ngannou, they haven't gone through some of the things that some of these other vets that we remember from Xtreme Couture have gone through. When you put your hand on Aljamain Sterling's shoulder and you give him that advice, whether it comes coach-wise, father figure-wise, what is that one thing that you really want to drive home for the next week for that guy? Because he's getting a lot of hate on social media. Ray Longo says he's getting threatened. This is a different feel at the end of this fight. What's that one point you want to drive home with Aljamain?
It's hard, and I feel like once this kind of news cycle switches, and that's the nice thing about with the UFC, they're always having shows. It's like the next story is going to be up, and a lot of people are. They're not going to forget about it once the rematch comes. That'll be all rehashed again. But like the way the news cycles keep shifting, you're going to get a couple days of that stuff, and then it'll die and taper down. The unfortunate thing is, it's from people that really don't walk the walk. They don't really understand what leads up to that, the process to get there, and then really the process after too. We're only predicated really to seeing the 15 or 25 minutes in the cage, and then that's it. There's a lot more that goes into these people's lives, and I don't think it's fair to be critical of them for something really Aljo didn't have any control over. He didn't do, right? So we're looking at things right now, and even when people were talking about, well, the belt shouldn't transfer hands. Well, what's going to keep a champion from not throwing illegal strikes then if the belt's not going to transfer hands? There's so many variables that come into play when you hear some of these criticisms for the kid, and he did absolutely nothing wrong. He was the victim of an illegal blow, and it is what it is. That's not how he wanted to win. That's not how Yan wanted to lose. But that's the rules, and that's the way we have to play it.
Who said it shouldn't transfer hands? Is that something like fans are saying, or somebody in the know?
I've seen very good reporters. Like I read some of their tweets. It was like, well, in this instance, I don't think it should transfer hands. And I'm like,
this isn't WWE. That wasn't a schmoz where you just send in a bunch of people, you get the disqualification, and then the champ walks off with the title. This is a proper sport.
And these are smart journalists that I followed for a long time, and I'm like, not transfer hands. Like, so what's going to keep a champion from not wanting to throw an illegal strike? If he's up, and let everybody's making, well, he was up. Well, what if he was up but broke his hand at the end of the round and knew he couldn't finish the fight? Right? There's so many variables that come into play that we can sit here and look at, and at the end of the day, that the rules are set for a reason, and that's the punishment for it.
Yeah, it was the way it was handled. I was very fine with that. In fact, I didn't even think the doctor needed to be brought in. I just thought as long as Mark had already ruled he was grounded and that it was intentional, the fight was over. I didn't want to see that guy go back in there, even if he did say, "Nah, I'm going to tough it out." I didn't want to see a Rocky moment. You could tell he was rocked. I'm sure. I guess I should ask you: is that how you felt too?
Yeah, I think you take a lot of onus off of the kid if you just make a swift judgment on the situation. It was obvious. I heard Mark say that he's grounded, throws the knee. It's an illegal strike to the head. It sounded like a guy hitting a cantaloupe. The kid drops. You can say whatever you think about how he reacted. That's none of our business. It was an illegal strike to his head, and it should have been a DQ on the spot. Now the way I look at the situation, I think Mark Smith and the commission wanted to make the right call. But just like in football, if you think it's a fumble, call it a fumble on the field and go back and review it. Call it a DQ, go back and review it. And if it is what you think it is, then the fight's over. It's a DQ. But that's going to alleviate a lot of this backlash that Aljamain gets in trying to make this kid decide to fight. The second point to that is, although Ray Longo's the head coach in the corner, I looked over at Ray and I said, "Coach, I don't think we let this guy continue, even if they somehow take a point or 2 points away from Yan." I wasn't sure Aljo should continue from that point on either, and Ray agreed. So I think at whatever they were deciding on, I think us as a corner was probably going to pull that fight too, just because we didn't want to send our guy back out there if he was like that.
Yeah, and I guess to be fair to Mark, maybe they actually have their process, their steps, and maybe that's all he was doing. But sure. I'm glad that in the end he got it right. This may have been his first UFC title fight. Goz and I were asking ourselves that question as it was unplanned, because we've seen this guy ref all the way from Tough Enough now into the big leagues. We're very happy for him, you know what I mean? And that was probably a tough situation, but in the end he got it right. With Petr Yan, I want to say this. I still wasn't sure he was the truth. He's good, and I can't wait for the rematch. They got some really good bantamweights out there, but I wasn't sure that fighting Faber and Aldo had told us yet exactly just how good Petr Yan was. But, man, he really, really impressed me that night. I certainly didn't think the fight was over. I thought Aljo was doing some things that were costing him because that activity was nice, and he was able to win around on each judge's scorecard, but you could tell it was also affecting him his cardio. So how he'll be able to balance the two, that's up to you guys to figure it out. But, it was, I don't know, it was pretty fascinating fight the way it was unfolding. A lot of surprises. But I will say this, Petr Yan, regardless of what his coaches were telling him and regardless of Russian and English or whatever, that was a Chris Webber play. I don't know if you guys remember in the 90s when Chris Webber called a timeout, and regardless of the fans or the coaches, he made the mistake. Petr Yan made the mistake. The guy's knee was down. He shouldn't have thrown it. And lastly, to you cunts out there, I swear, I only reserve that word for special people. But anybody that thinks this kid was acting, stop it already, man. Like a few weeks ago, Corey Sandhagen delivered a vicious knee to Frankie Edgar. And we all went, whoa, that's the highlight of the year. And Sandhagen asked Edgar if he was all right, and Edgar stood there and took it like a man, like, why can that mess someone up, but this knee not mess someone up? I don't know. That part bothered me a little bit. He was rocked, he was rocked. Did you lose your parlay and you're pissed? All right, I get it. I've said Petr Yan was up 2-1 and probably going to win the fourth if it continued the same way I said that. Are you a Petr Yan fan or whatever and you're upset? Sure. But there's a way to be upset, and then you exit the stadium and then you start the smack talk the next time or whatever. But at that particular moment, I mean, come on, man. That means you're watching frauds out there. I don't believe we're watching frauds out there. We're watching human beings play high-speed human chess, man. It's a thing of beauty. That's just the way this fight played out. I mean, Eric, you said it himself. You guys didn't go through the whole ruse of going to a hospital for no reason, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been in those rides before, and if he was acting, he was doing a pretty good job with me too, because I'd explain what was going on in the rounds and everything else, just kind of get him caught up. It wasn't like he was doesn't remember anything at all. But you know, and that was part of the protocol from the paramedic. You know, before he gave him some meds, so he was trying to understand where he was at mentally. And you know, it took a while for him to kind of come to and understand where we were at and the gravity of things are going on. So it wasn't like he was, you know, melting in his chair or anything like that. But at the same time, I think in any fight, a lot of times, either knocked out or not, it's hard to remember stuff. So, you know, just running over things with them.
Your gym has won UFC titles. You've been in corners where you've won titles. So on the regional scene, you've won major titles. Was this the first time that you were in a corner when a UFC title was won by your athlete?
Yeah, that was the first one that we won. So, you know, and it's just tough to celebrate it that way, but it does feel good, mainly because, you know, although I was a very, very small part of Aljo's career, this is like a sliver in his career. But understanding who and what Aljamain Sterling is and what he represents, it was very nice to be a part of, especially just being able to see the way a champion actually works. You know, there's a lot of things I think that people overlook in Aljamain Sterling, and for me as a coach, are the things that like drew me to him. You know, he's very much a teammate. He's a very good kid. All the people that he brought out with him were all fighters of from his training camp. You know, there wasn't a day that if he was taken off, he was still here helping them. For me, as a guy that runs a gym, a facility, you know, his last spar day, he gets done sparring, and him and Marab are mopping my mats, cleaning up, taking care of their area, their space. You know, and I kind of chuckled. I had the video of it, man. I was like, dude, this guy's 1 week out from a title fight, and he's taking care of a gym that's kind of adopted him. You know, this is not technically his home, but he just does all the right things in the intangibles in his character, and he's just a good kid to work with, man. So, you know, I'm happy for him. Although it is a title in a sense, but you know, now I'm just kind of geared up for March 27th and Dan Ige next weekend.
Yeah. Look, we're running out of time here, but so that's done, and congrats, you know, again on the win. And with Dan Ige, you know, it's been fun watching that guy rise through the ranks and become one of the top 45ers in the world. Any quick thoughts on his fight and Francis a few weeks later?
Yeah, Dan's got a good opponent, man. Gavin Tucker out of Canada, great kid. After worked with him a few times, he was hoping to come out and train with us, and then for the Cub fight, and then he ends up fighting Dan. So that's how the MMA game works. But you know, this kid's ultra competitive. He's really good. I think it's going to be a super fun fight. And then you know, heavyweight title fight. Stipe Miocic, the baddest man on the planet. You know, and I think he's made incredible strides since the last time he fought Francis. So I think both guys are kind of on that collision course, and you know, I'm looking forward to see Francis compete against the best in the world, and then see what we have after that.